Welcome to another episode of the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name's Lewis Gray, and my co host for this episode was Elliot Elsley. For this episode, we were joined by the brilliant Sarah Clay. So, Sarah runs a LinkedIn marketing agency called Sarah Clay Social, where she specializes in helping large organizations with launching and managing employee advocacy programs, as well as offering things like hands on LinkedIn training and much more. We discussed quite a lot in this episode, as you'll hear, but a real standout for me was the role that any employee can play in an advocacy program, regardless of whether or not they're actually posting anything. We always say on this podcast that every employee can make an impact, and you're about to find out exactly how they can do that. We also discussed Sarah's LinkedIn training methods, focusing specifically on how she helps people go from never posting on LinkedIn to building a posting habit that will stand the test of time, as well as the methods that she uses to build their confidence and ease any fears they might have about showing up online. So, whether you're about to launch an advocacy program or currently managing a mature one, there's something in here for you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Right. So, Sarah, firstly, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. Would you mind just telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Lewis. Thank you very much for inviting me on. It's great to be here with you both. I'm Sarah Clay. I'm CEO of a LinkedIn marketing agency, Sarah Clay Social. We do done for you LinkedIn company pages as well as the training, how to help people use LinkedIn more effectively. I particularly specialize in working with employees of large organizations to help them use their personal profiles to help amplify their personal message as well as the message for the company.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I mean, in terms of what we're going to be discussing today, for the listeners' context, you and I had a call a couple of weeks back and we kind of discussed things that we might want to talk about in this episode. And something that really stood out to me is something that we've kind of defined as passive advocacy in the past. And essentially, what we mean by that is not every employee within an organization is going to want to start posting to their own LinkedIn. They might just take some time to build up their confidence. They might need the training. So obviously that's where you come in. But we always say about the fact that we don't think any advocate should be left behind. Everybody can contribute in some way. So when we're talking about passive advocacy, we're talking about encouraging employees to engage with company posts or posts from senior leadership, whoever that might be, but as a way of contributing and advocating, showing support without actually posting. So, Sarah, we spoke about this a couple of weeks back, but you've obviously worked with a number of clients whose employees are hesitant to post on their own LinkedIn profiles. So, from your perspective, why is it important to recognize passive engagement as valuable?
I always think everything that an employee can do, anything that they can do at all, is going to help the broader message. And we all know that when a post gets more engagement on LinkedIn, whether it's company page or personal profile, if it gets more engagement, then it gets pushed out to more people. And so, if an employee can just go to a post and just hit the like button, it's still of value. Obviously, if they could do more than that, it is of more value. But I understand that for a lot of employees, they're very shy, they're very, introverted, they're very busy. They just don't have the time, the inclination, the desire to appear on LinkedIn and to be there. But if they can contribute in some way, then that every little helps. So if you've got a team of 30 people and a post goes out on the company page and 20 of those people just hit the like button, that's all they do, that still counts. It still counts as engagement and it still helps the post. It helps the visibility of the post. So I'm about congratulating every action, and also in the hope that you congratulate somebody for doing something very little. Hopefully they may feel congratulated and confident enough that they may do a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a real stepping stone journey, I tend to find, with those things. In our experience of kind of launching lots of advocacy programs, there's people in the business that often have vested interest in posting on social. They have their own personal reason why they should or need to, and sometimes drawing that out of people is one thing. But for those that perhaps don't have that same vested interest, my brain goes to senior leadership, sales teams that have this. For those that don't, people that work, back office, in accounts, wherever those sort of things are, little baby steps to getting them into this process is often half the battle. I tend to find of, let's just encourage you to like something, because maybe you've just nobody's mentioned that before, and that's almost half of it, that nobody said, hey, could you just like this, and people go, oh yeah, of course I can. I like working here, I've got no reason not to. Just that action in itself of saying, could you like this, goes a really, really long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me a little bit of somebody was talking yesterday about this Couch to 5K program that they're on. And you start off sitting on your sofa doing absolutely nothing and you end up running 5K. But it's in steps, it's in little bits, and building up your strength, building up your technique. And I think it's a really good way of looking at it, that it is little steps. Yeah, for sure.
And I think it's sometimes nervousness as well. I think there's an air of, with all social media, how we've all kind of bred social media over the last 10 years. People want to put their best foot forward. If you post on Instagram, you post the exciting things that you're doing in your day. You're kind of trying to put yourself out to the world. You want to put yourself out there in the best light. I think people are nervous about doing that from a workplace perspective as well, of what if I get this wrong? What if I look silly? So people recant back to the kind of safer option more often than not. But liking is, to your point, just a nice way to open the door. Let's just start here. Let's not ask too much of you yet, and we'll see where we end up in 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever it is, amount of time.
3 years, even.
3
But yes,
years, in some cases, 3 years. Yes,
absolutely. No, I and fear is something that I hear so often. Nervousness, fear, whatever you want to call it or frame it, but people are frightened, especially if it's a new skill for them, it's a new platform for them. And as somebody who's on LinkedIn and been on LinkedIn a long time, it's sometimes I do have to take a step back and remember that actually these people have never done this before. This is brand new. So let's put yourself in their shoes and help them get over that fear.
Love that. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the couch to 5K analogy as well. That is spot on. As somebody who's used it themselves, that is perfect. But I have to reference a disseminate feature here. We do try to keep the podcast platform agnostic, but for the sake of the performance data I'm about to reference, I think it just adds some context. So we released a feature called Boost Post, I think a couple of years ago now, and it essentially just streamlines the process of encouraging employees to like company posts or posts from senior individuals. But during the initial test, before we actually rolled out to all of our clients with this new feature, we saw something from the test. I can't remember the exact statistic now, so I'm almost regretting bringing it up because I might undersell it. But the increase in reach from employees engaging with posts during that pilot phase was over 1,000%. So, I mean, I know this will vary company to company, depending on the amount of people that you have engaging with the company posts. But Sarah, from your perspective, what results have you seen from just having employees resharing or commenting even on company content?
Oh, huge. I mean, there's two aspects to look at, really. And one, obviously, is the reach and the engagement of the post and what happens on the post itself, which is incredible. So once people in the organization start commenting on posts, because LinkedIn, everything we do on LinkedIn, pretty much everything is transparent. Other people can see where people are commenting, etc., etc. So that brings other people to the post itself because they've seen a connection of theirs has commented on a post. They think, oh, okay, let me have a look. What are they commenting on? I want to see. And what I noticed is that the engagement on the company page post is increased massively because it's a bit like when you're in the classroom, let's say you're in the classroom and the lecturer or the teacher says, has anybody got a question? Nobody wants to be the first one to answer that question or, put their hand up. But once somebody does, it opens the floodgates. So everybody thinks, oh, it's okay to do that. This is what we're meant to do here. So when employees start liking and commenting on posts, other people start to join in. And what I see is that they don't only comment on the post, but they comment on the employees' comments. And a conversation can ensue, lots of conversations can ensue. So the increased engagement on posts in general is huge once you start getting the employees commenting on the post. And of course, the other thing that all this does, which I love and I didn't realize was a thing, was the whole culture of the company shifts. So the whole company starts to, I call it the Netflix effect. They start talking about the posts on the company page. They start talking about each other's posts in the office. Going, oh, did you say I loved your post yesterday? I didn't know you did that at the weekend. And all these other things start to happen as well. And once it becomes a talked about thing in the office, then more and more people want to jump on board because they're getting FOMO. So, oh, what are you talking about? I want to have a go at this employee advocacy game. So the effects are massive, just literally by adding a few comments on the company page posts.
Yeah, I've seen that. It works in so many different ways as well. Like from just a pure social media digital marketing perspective, the compound effect is huge, right? When once a couple of people have commented and a couple more people start to comment, and it snowballs really, really quickly. It's why you often see LinkedIn posts have just stacked amounts of comments on them for some reason, where you go, and then others will have almost none, and it's almost quite binary, like lots of comments or no comments, generally speaking, for a lot of the content. But your point around the company culture element is something that we talk about quite a lot internally. Is external communications are also internal communications, which is kind of a backwards way of thinking about it. But all your employees at your company are scrolling LinkedIn each day. So when people are talking about things that are going on in the company culture stuff, they're seeing that. And if you don't have an internal intranet, or even if you do, this is another place that people are seeing kind of company comms from that perspective. And it's an overlooked area, and it's hard to attribute and kind of prove from that perspective. But people are seeing what your company are up to in other places, not just in the intranet that you kind of tightly control. And it's a really, really big influence from that culture and that communication standpoint.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything, with all of that. And it is, and as I say, I didn't know that was going to happen when I started doing this, but it very clearly does happen. Yeah.
We've done some research on it in the past, and we've seen it depends on the company really drastically at times, particularly in size of the company. What we tend to notice is company page posts will be engaged with on average about 25 to 30% by internal employees. So you can control that metric a lot more if you're driving activity in that direction or not. But also, if 25% of them are employees, there's quite a lot of people that are just finding out information from your company. Not everybody. I think this is the other thing for comms people more often than not. I think they think everybody reads every newsletter that they send out via email and every post that they put onto the internet, which just realistically isn't the case, is it? Nobody can read everything that large organizations are posting about. So having this stuff elsewhere, it's just more touch points, different areas that you're kind of communicating with different people.
Again, I always say we want to keep the podcast platform agnostic. So I've mentioned Boost Posts as a system to kind of facilitate this behavior. But, if you've got thousands of employees or even hundreds or tens of advocates even, I know there's going to be listeners wondering, okay, we see the value, but how can we actually start doing this? So again, Sarah, from your side, what do you see as like some simple systems or just habits that companies can introduce to encourage this kind of passive participation?
So it's about, for me, what I see, it's about creating the employee advocacy program as a proper shift within the organization and creating it as something that, guys, this is what we're doing here. This is a new program. We're doing it. If you want to take part, if you think you want to take part, come and talk to me. But let's make this a proper thing rather than just a kind of side hustle thing that we can dip in and out of. So that's the first thing, is creating it as a proper program. Proper training right from the beginning is really important. And it always has to start with why. Why do you want to do this? What's in it for you? Because if the employees don't see any benefit for themselves, if all they think they're doing is just driving revenue to the company, the engagement's going to be a lot less, or the take-up's going to be a lot less. So why is it good for each employee? Why is it good for you? Why is it good for you? What are you going to get out of this? And then driving it forward. having an external person, obviously I am slightly biased here, but having an external person or a dedicated person internally to drive it is really important for that status of the program. And it's not just somebody in marketing is going to do that, because somebody in marketing already has a full job, a full day, full week. They don't need another project to be looking after. So, having somebody in charge of it, giving it a name, giving people roles, so tiers of roles. So, people who are going to be posting, and up to you, obviously, what you call, we'll call the program, and use names for the different layers and tiers. And I like to work with a company and help them choose these names, ambassadors, leaders, supporters, whatever you want to call them. People need to know, what's my job here? What am I doing? Oh, okay, I'm commenting. I've got to comment on one post a week, or all I have to do is like. That's all I have to do, so that people know exactly what's involved, and keeping it simple, not making it complicated, but just keeping it very, very simple and communicating. So if a post goes out on a company page, if you've got a system, a program like Disseminate, that happens, the notifications go out automatically. But if you haven't, make sure an email goes out with a link to the post, encouraging people to actually go to the post and make that comment or like the post or whatever. Or so many other things. That's a start.
I couldn't agree more with the identity of this as a program, as an initiative. That's always a kind of a flag that gets thrown when we're talking to prospects. We want to work long term with all of the clients that we work with. And one of the kind of red flags from my perspective is when you can tell somebody thinks this is just a piece of software. They buy the piece of software and they've done employee advocacy. Oh, we've bought employee advocacy now, we're done. And we're not really going to plan beyond that point. Talking about it as this is a company initiative, this needs an identity within the business. You want to give it a name, you want to give it something that people go, we haven't just bought another piece of software that I have to log into, which is a lot of employees thought, oh, great, another login I need to kind of remember. You want it to be, this is a company initiative. This is just facilitating that from our side with the platform. Obviously, we're the facilitators for that. Makes worlds and worlds of difference. And it's so palpable in employee advocacy programs that we run, where companies take that kind of initiative drive top down. This is a big decision that's been made, versus we have an employee advocacy platform. You can use it if you want to. It's over here. It's such a big difference for most companies.
When I very, very first started teaching people how to do LinkedIn several years ago now, I came across a client of mine who showed me their intranet or system, whatever it was. And literally there were thousands of posts in there. And she had to go in and choose one to post on her personal profile. And there was no sorting, there was no labeling. She hadn't got a clue. Nobody had showed her how to do it. And it was then I think my brain started whirring, thinking, well, this is a good idea in principle. But actually, in practice, this is terrible. This is not going to work. So, yeah.
It needs that management piece. It needs somebody to think and care about it, to go, actually, we're going to put content in these, nice little buckets for people to be able to access. It's going to be tailored, to your point, to the people that we're talking to. If you're in a sales team, there's sales related content, and we're not asking much of you, but we'd like you to share and put product information out there. If you're a developer and you're naturally a lot more kind of social media shy, hey, we're just asking you to like stuff and make it super simple and super passive for you. It's not rocket science in its own right. I think sometimes people just need that kind of structure put in front of them to make sense of it, and then they can kind of go from there and build it out in their own way. But that first element of it, don't just dump everything in one place and let everybody work it out. It just isn't going to work from that side.
Sarah, from your perspective, I know obviously we've spoken about communicating the benefits, so making sure every employee knows what's in it for them. I wanted to come onto your training because it's something that really stood out to me from our initial conversation, and obviously this is your bread and butter. But I want to know, just when you're helping somebody post for the very first time, what's that training experience like for them? What does that entail?
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely massive. So I stand in rooms with very, very clever people, really clever people, far cleverer than me. And they're doing something they've never done before. And they are really, some of them are really frightened, really scared to put that message out there. So initially what we will do, because my sessions are very practical and I spend a whole day in a company with their teams, and we build their profile, or they build their profiles, they do some lead generation, what have you. But with regard to the content, we write a post together, and they all write the same kind of post, and it's a very straightforward, simple post, and then they all post it. It's not great for the algorithm, but at least it gets them doing it, and that's the purpose. And when people post for the first time, I have stood next to people and literally physically held that one hand while they've pressed post with the other hand. And I've had rooms of people standing up and giving that person a round of applause, because it's such a great big breakthrough for that person. And it's such a delight to see it. It really, warms my heart to see that they've got over that barrier and they've posted for the first time, because it's scary. I get it. I do get it scary, because I remember the first time I ever posted on LinkedIn, I remember posting a video for the first time, and I felt physically sick when I posted that video and worried about it for hours and hours afterwards. And of course, LinkedIn didn't blow up. It didn't kick me off. I'm still there, 9.5 years later. But it is a big step for many people. And it's just wonderful being able to help them get through that.
Do you find that fear comes from different motivations depending on, I tend to say, I'm going to say seniority here, but depending on the person within the business? I often have seen different people respond in different ways to why they don't want to post. Like, fear of looking silly is one, but I also find senior leadership has a tendency to be like fear of not being recognized as perhaps the clever thought leader that they are is a factor as well, which is not one that often people talk about in the same way because it's a bit ego related. But just interested to see if you see different kind of fear motivations for people as to why they won't.
So I think in terms of seniority or position, it goes across all different, all the sectors and all the positions. I don't think it's specific in any way, not from my experience. But the fears are, yes, you're absolutely right. Fear of looking silly, fear of saying something which, well, it's fear of being judged, isn't it? Fear of people judging that perhaps you said something that wasn't very clever, or maybe not that it was wrong, but it was meaningless. But actually, every contribution that we can make to the world and putting our knowledge out there has value to somebody. But yes, I think those are the two main fears: is looking silly and saying something that people will judge as either not appropriate or not, as you said, not clever enough.
Yeah, I also sometimes see I've had the feedback of, well, I don't have very many connections on LinkedIn. I've only got X number of connections. And you always think, well, sort of, chicken and egg situation here. If we start posting, we're going to generate connections and you will get more engagement over time. But I'm just wondering if you find that as a kind of pushback that people sometimes has that I don't have very many connections, so it's not worth me doing it.
Absolutely, 100%. So yeah, there's no point because nobody's going to see it anyway. But I always kick back on that one with, well, now's the time to make your mistakes and practice, because not many people will see those mistakes. So let's start now. This is a perfect time for you. And hopefully by the time you have more connections and more followers, you'll have more confidence and you'll feel better on the platform.
Yeah, I'd also reiterate that a lot of people are just lurkers on LinkedIn. People will just scroll, they'll appreciate a post. I'm a culprit. I will see a post that I like, I'll copy the link and I'll send it to somebody within the business because I think it's relevant to them. But I haven't liked, I haven't commented, I haven't reshared it. And I'm an advocate of doing this. So people might still be seeing the post. I think that's something that's worth reiterating. Just because you're not getting the engagements that maybe you want to see or that you deem to be impressive when you first start posting, everyone influences somebody. Somebody will see it. If you're a salesperson, you're connected with a number of prospects. It's still just demonstrating that thought leadership. I do think it can be sad sometimes when you hear it from salespeople, because we just recorded a really great episode with a chap called Tom Bosson, and he was basically explaining his methods to get people posting. And he'll tell his salespeople that your outbox or your sent box is a goldmine for post ideas. Like if you feel like you have nothing to say, check that. You're answering people's problems and offering solutions via email. Turn that into content. But also, it's sad because it's like, well, you feel confident enough to express your expertise with a prospect, somebody who you're actually trying to sell to. Do it on LinkedIn. Just jump in. You are as clever as you think you are. You've been doing this. You're clued up about the product. But it's a very long-winded way of asking this question, Sarah. But I was curious to know what is it that kind of makes people click when it comes to trying to build their confidence? What tactics are you using to make them believe in themselves?
Great question. So actually, as you were saying that, I remembered another fear, and it was fear that nobody's interested in what I've got to say. And I think with regards to the sales team, yes, I know my prospect wants to know that, but does anybody else? So that's definitely something I do hear. So in my attempt to demystify everything that goes on LinkedIn, I use a lot of analogies, as you've probably realized. And I have a phrase that you behave rather on LinkedIn in the same way that you behave in real life. So treating LinkedIn not as social media, but as a networking party, because we all have a party, right? And using situations in a networking party to try to encourage people to use LinkedIn. For example, commenting on somebody's post. So I do a bit of role play and I get people to stand in a circle of maybe 5 or 6 people and somebody makes a comment. Somebody's leading the conversation. Oh, do you know, this happened to me yesterday. What would you say in that situation? What would be your response to that person? So then they say it and I go, that is your comment on LinkedIn. Exactly what you just said. And people go, really? So yes, really. Just think about if that person had spoken that in a group situation, what would you say to them? You'd say, congratulations, thank you very much. You put your opinion forward, but in a nice, gentle way, not bashing it over people's heads, and just reframing the whole of LinkedIn as a real life situation has honestly, it's just been such a game changer for helping people get over a lot of the fears of actually going onto LinkedIn and using it.
Oh, it's a fantastic analogy, I think. It's one that we've spoken about in the past. If you had paid to go to a networking event and your sales team rocked up and didn't speak to a single person there, and you got back and it's like, okay, who did you speak to? It's like, well, we didn't. We just sat in silence the whole time. That would be an issue. If you treat LinkedIn the same way, you start to realize why it's important to speak up when you've got hundreds of millions of people who could potentially see that post.
And actually, I had another one the other day, and I said, you wouldn't go to a networking meeting and just stand in the corner and say, this is what I do, everybody, this is what I do. You go and talk to people, you ask them what they do, and then you tell them what you do. So do that on LinkedIn.
Completely agreed. And again, it comes down to treating it, well, as you said, behaving on there as you would in real life.
Yeah.
Going through these sessions, though, obviously habits are something that that take time to build. There's been whole books written about building habits. I'm curious to know from your side, what does that follow up look like? So you've had these training sessions. Is it just like a one and done? Are you regularly checking in and providing further encouragement? What does it look like after that first training session?
So in my naivety, when I first started doing this, before, way before the book, before I'd read anything about how to do this, I just thought, okay, this could be a thing. I honestly thought that if I spent a whole day with a company and I left and they'd be going, this is amazing. Yeah, we're going to do this. Brilliant. I honestly thought that they would do it. Do they? No, they don't. With all the best will in the world, very, very few people will just take that initiative and that program and run with it. And, despite the fact you may have the head of marketing sending you emails going, why aren't you posting? People need that encouragement. They need that support and they need that accountability. We all do. It's like joining the gym in January and by January the 10th, you're not going anymore, even though you're still paying your membership. So I now, have a commitment from my clients that they have to keep me on as a consultant for at least 6 months while this system starts to work. And that can look like many different things depending on the company. And we work that out at the beginning. But just a monthly check-in or a bi-monthly check-in makes such a huge difference. It keeps the program running, it keeps people excited, it keeps them energized, and it keeps them doing it. So that's what's really needed, is that ongoing process. And I've got a client that I've been working with and over a year, and they say, we are never ever letting you go, because we know the minute we let you go, this system will die. So and it's the touch points get less and less, but the touch points are still there. And in fact, looking at the engagement of the employees, you can see as our meetings are approaching the days before, of course, all the employees' engagement increases, but at least they're doing it, right? They're there. So.
Sarah, something that we discussed during our initial conversation was about the role that executives and senior leadership teams can play in an advocacy program. So when we're talking about this on the podcast, we're often talking about the overwhelming positives, but of course there can be some negatives as well. And I'd like to come on to that because it's something that you and I discussed then. But just before we do, what role do you think executives play in the success or failure of an advocacy program?
So it's really important to get executives involved around the whole advocacy program, because it's a new program. So the authority, if you like, and the influence needs to come from the top, needs to come top down. And so, why should an employee spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, a day on LinkedIn if they don't see their bosses doing it? It's got to be led by example. There's absolutely no question about it at all. And even if the executives maybe not doing it as well, perhaps as they could be, or perhaps as well as some other people in the organization, which comes down to training, obviously, but as well as other things, but they've got to be seen to be doing it. Well, they've got to be doing it, actually. And what's really valuable is when executives start to comment on employees' posts. It looks great for the company, for one thing. It looks like, wow, you're a really cohesive unit, you're really supportive of your junior staff, etc., etc. But boy, doesn't it make that staff member feel great if if their boss, the big CEO or one of the C-suite, even just likes or little comment on one of their posts. That's going to drive that employee to do it more and more. So it is really important that the C-suite are on there and they're leading the program. Another reason to make sure that the C-suite and the CEOs are on board is if somebody knows that the CEO or the C-suite are looking at their posts and looking at their comments, then they're much more likely to do what they're not supposed to do, but they're not going to say things that are political or controversial, etc., etc. So having that whole buy-in just helps people keep on brand, if you like, on the company brand, but without having to be following a whole string and pages of rules.
So we've spoken about the positives, the positive impact that executives can have, but obviously, Sarah, in our initial conversation, we spoke about a style of leadership that can potentially have a negative impact. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit for our listeners?
I think the most negative thing that a CEO or a C-suite can do is to not get involved. I honestly do. And they don't even need to do much. So your example is perfect about Bradley liking, and all he did was just click the like button on your post, and that inspired you and pushed you forward to do even more because it made you feel so good and noticed, which is really important. So I think it's just getting that involvement and also talking about the program around the kettle or around the office or at the beginning and the end of meetings, whether you're on Zoom or in person, and talking about it, making it a really important part of everybody's day. And the culture, the whole culture within the company has to be involved in this. And if the CEOs are leading it and talking about it, much more likely to get engagement. And actually, if the CEO can be the one to invite people to join the program, I think you get much better buy-in. Generally, it's left to the marketing department because that's their, that's it's kind of in their ambit, if you like. But if the CEO can send out the email, the message, whatever, personally asking people, saying, I want you to be involved in this program, that's got to count for a lot.
We see that so often particularly in reporting lines as well. So once people get to a point where they're starting to report on this and it's going up to the C-suite with results and things like that, where I've seen some incredible step changes in advocacy programs really kind of spiraling upwards is this got mentioned in a town hall meeting as an example. So the CEO had a slide on employee advocacy. It would have been framed as a different term or something like that, but it would have been framed as our employees on social media. Those little items, and it can be a 2-minute statement as part of a town hall, part of a keynote, whatever it is that a CEO is doing, has a huge driving impact on the rest of the business because they go, oh, this person's talking about this. This is being like reported on to that person. And that drives a huge change across the business because all of a sudden they realize this is seen. This is something that's really, really visible within the business.
Unfortunately, Sarah, all good things must come to an end. So I'm reluctant to ever close out a good conversation, but unfortunately we must. So I'll finish with just the question that I always ask every guest, because I'm keen to know who you're admiring in this space, whether it's in marketing or employee advocacy. But who would you like to see us invite onto the podcast next?
I completely forgot you were going to ask me this question. But I am going to go with Laura Hannan. Do you know Laura?
I don't know.
Yeah, Laura Hannan. She's fabulous. She and I had a great meeting recently. I've known her for quite a long time. She's kind of in this space, and she's just brilliant. So she's my person I would recommend.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll check her out and hopefully we can get her on the podcast as well. So final thing to say then is just for anybody that's listening and wants to know more about what Sarah's doing, if you want general employee advocacy, wisdom, marketing knowledge, whatever it might be around LinkedIn training, go follow Sarah. But Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Take care, everybody.